If you are considering starting a podcast for either yourself or your company, then this episode is for you. I'm bringing on fellow podcast host Jordan Yates, and together we'll share how we started our podcast. We'll walk through planning and strategy development to branding, what gear we use, what software platforms we're excited about, and how we measure success. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. On today's show, I'm so thrilled to have my friend Jordan Yates with us. Hey Jordan.
How's it going? I'm excited to be here. I've been binging this podcast lately during my gym sessions, and so it's fun to be back on.
Good. Do you have a favorite episode? One that you think everybody should listen to?
There was one that I listened to a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what it was called, but he was talking about content versus collateral. And ever since then, like I've had that conversation with so many of my customers of like, hey, do you know the difference? If so, like we're missing X, Y, and Z in this column, and this is why there's a difference. I can't remember the name of it, but it was really good.
Yeah. Our friend came on from Eaton to talk about that.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's a good one. I love that one. Well, cool. Well, today, instead of talking about collateral versus content, we're going to be starting talking about podcasts, which I know is a subject near and dear to your heart and one that you have a lot of experience in. And I know a lot of marketers are out there thinking this might be the year to either start placing executives on podcasts or themselves on podcasts, or maybe starting their own. And our latest State of Marketing to Engineers report shows that more and more engineers have adopted podcasts as a preference for listening every single week. So it's here, it's big, it's growing, it's kind of at that tipping point now. So, Jordan, why are you a believer in podcasts?
Well, I've been a listener of podcasts for years, and I'm just not a big music listener. And so if I'm even at the gym or I'm driving, like I just like to listen to people talk about things I'm interested in or that I want to learn about. And typically I'm busy, so I don't have time to sit down and watch the video. And so just getting to listen is great. And a couple years ago, like I started my own podcast. I've been on many podcasts, and I just find them to be a really great way to be informative about whatever you're an expert on, and just a fun way to, I guess, cross promote in the industry.
Yeah, I do the same. When I am working out at the gym, I'm at that point now. I would rather have a podcast or an audiobook. I'll even be like, okay, I can't listen to this unless I'm working
Yeah.
out to push a little harder on that rowing machine or whatever it is. So, yeah, cool. Well, what do you think? So, for B2B companies listening in that situation, like I said, they're thinking maybe this is the year. What do you consider the tipping point between putting someone on a podcast, like maybe one of your, faces of your campaign, your spokespeople, or hosting your own?
So I think putting somebody on is obviously a great first step because it's easier. You literally just go be the guest, and being a guest is so much easier than having your own podcast. And once you have your own, you will realize and appreciate how nice it is to be a guest. Like today, getting to just show up and be your guest, it's wonderful. I don't have to edit anything, I don't have to do anything. I just get to be here and talk about what I like to talk about. Whereas, starting your own, that's a whole different discussion. So I think there's never a good or bad time to go be a guest. I think if you have an opportunity, take it now. There shouldn't be any overthinking in that. Whereas when it's time to start your own podcast in the B2B world, maybe you guys have a very technical brand, or you have a lot to say, but you feel like it's kind of hard to fit it all in a post, fit it all in one video. And you have like more of the long form explanation stories to tell around your products, your brand, your services. That's when podcasting is nice, because you have that long form opportunity to just kind of get into all the details, get into the stories, highlight your customers, your distributors, and all of that. And I think it's just a really casual way about like putting content out there without having to feel so like pressured to be super interesting and snappy in 2 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, because that's harder sometimes than that
It
long
really
form
is.
version, right? Yeah, I know there's a lot of styles of podcasts. You have an interview format like we're doing here versus, say, I come on and just talk for 20 minutes.
hmm
Why should someone go one way versus another?
So interviewing's nice because I've done many solo episodes myself. You get really out of breath just talking for 30 minutes straight. I'll attest to that. But I think interviewing is nice because you have that like question format answer where the person asking the question could be someone on your team that isn't super technical, and they have that like curiosity about them and they're interested in learning more. And then it props the person up that you're interviewing as an expert. Whether or not they're like the smartest person ever, they're positioned in that episode as an expert. So that person can come from, the engineering department, and maybe the marketer or salesperson's interviewing them. Or it can come from, another company that you're partnering with. But it gives you a lot of opportunities to have that expert and interviewer dynamic.
Yeah, I'd also add it's a way to leverage each other's communities, right? Kind of like you
hmm
do with co-marketing with a webinar. You have the power of two databases and two LinkedIn communities that come together, and that's always a nice multiplier effect. Well, what are some of the misconceptions people have about podcasts?
Ooh. So I think one that's been coming out lately is, well, everybody has a podcast. Why should we do it? Like it's oversaturated.
Mm,
There's just too many of them. Like, what's the point now? We're too late in the game to do it. And I would say, yeah, there are a lot of podcasts. Everybody thinks they're a podcaster these days, me included. So I get why somebody would say that. But I think if you have like a unique vision, or it doesn't even have to be overly unique, but you have a message you want to share with your customers and your audience, I say you should still go for it. You should see what happens, because you can get a lot of content out of a podcast episode. We can record for 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden you can have a week's worth of content, if not more, just from that 30 minutes.
yeah, gosh, all the ways you can leverage this, and you can have video footage and audio as well. But you're right,
hmm
it does start with thinking, what is the purpose of this podcast, and really, how is it unique? How am I not a Me Too podcast? How am I approaching this subject from a different lens or a new subject altogether? So I think there's space still for lots of introduction of new podcasts to the market, but it's really niching down and finding that right subject matter at this point. So yeah, I'm with you there. And then just doing it better, just being
Yeah.
smarter about it, right? So those are a few key considerations, I'd say, in building a podcast strategy. What are some others, some things that people might want to think through before pulling the trigger?
Yeah, so I would say you need to think about, why am I doing it? I think if you're looking at your like a brand audit and you think, okay, like I am starting with who we are, what is our value, like what do we bring to the table? And I think you guys have done some really good episodes on doing a brand audit every so often. And I think if you can understand that value well, then you're going to be able to communicate it well to your customers. But I think if you just are saying, we should start a podcast just because I think that's an extra box to check off in marketing, don't do it for that reason. Think like, what is our value and what do we want to share? And I think that comes from doing your more traditional side of your marketing, of understanding your value proposition, understanding your message, and then use that to prop up your why, because we want to tell this to more people. We want to show who we are to more people, but you need to know who you are before you start showing it off via podcasting.
Perfect, perfect. And think about how it fits in the mix of everything else that you have going on because, budget and time is not finite. So what are
Yeah.
you trading off in order to do this? And go in with that realization too, because podcasts are not they're not easy. And there's no easy button here. They're pretty time intensive. And I know
Mhm.
there's a lot of shortcuts and technology that can support a podcast, which we'll get into, but know that, like anything else, you're making trade-offs when you commit to a podcast. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like another thing too, like it just touching on the pricing is it depends on your in-house capabilities and your willingness to learn the technologies, like you said, that we'll get into. But I know a lot of people that don't think through wanting a podcast. They just jump in and then they're paying someone 6 to 10 grand a month to produce it. And it's like they didn't think about where it goes in the strategy first. And so you need to, like you said, where does it fit into your current content strategy? Does it make sense for you? And then when it comes to the approach of doing it, is farming it out the best idea? Do you want to spend 10 grand a month for something that you don't know is going to work? And we'll get more into that, but it's just definitely one of those things you want to really, really think through before doing.
Yeah, yeah. So let's say you've made the decision that yes, we're doing this. I have a plan. I understand my audience. I what comes next? Is it building an editorial calendar, or are you looking more in the mechanics around building the show from a tactical perspective, like giving it a name, finding a place to host it, like, or does all of that happen in parallel?
It sort of happens in parallel. So I would say the first thing, once we figured out our why we're doing it, is think of like, are you going to be doing it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? And then once you figure out how often you're doing it, you should think about what topics are we going to talk about and have some like topic umbrellas and think about, okay, if I'm going to talk about this topic, who do I need to interview for this? So at my last job, right before I left, we were launching a podcast and I had to think about if I want 52 episodes a year and I want it from these topics and need this amount of experts. Before I even start, I need to make sure that my coworkers that are going to be on the podcast are willing to be on the podcast. And you'd be so surprised. Some people are really into it, and some people you cannot beg enough and they just won't do it.
I
So
could
you
see
need to
that.
figure out, do I have the infrastructure and the content like planned out, plus the people that are willing to be on it? So once you have that figured out, I would say write it all down, map it out, try to align it with your content strategy with however far out you plan. And then there's the tactical side. So, Wendy, are you ready to get into the tactical? We're going to implement it.
Well, before we do, I have one more question slash comment
Yeah.
on that because it made me think of this. I love how you said, okay, if we decide it's weekly, we have 52 weeks and we have these content themes. And so let's map that and then find guests underneath. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of who can I have as a guest and then think topics second or maybe even
Mm-hmm.
third. And or this panic of because you're tied to this 52 weeks and you're panicking because you don't have the next guest lined up, you have substandard people or really random people come on. So
Mm-hmm.
it might be that in reality, you need to go every other week or some cadence that's a little more comfortable in order to stay on task, I guess, stay focused on those core topics.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way the first year I did my personal podcast because I was going out hot. Like I was weekly, I was getting episodes. First, I was solo. Then I was like, no, I want guests. And then I realized it's exhausting coordinating guests and like having an episode weekly, having it edited, having it published and promoted. And I think about like a couple months in, I started being like, hey guys, I'm actually going to go bi weekly. Oh, I'm going to go monthly. Oh, I'm going to disappear for 4 months. Like, so it's just so not it looks horrible like to do that. So you need to know, can I commit to it? So when 2024 started and I re-upped my season 2, I made a commitment to myself like I need to plan this out. So I had like 20 guests lined up and a bunch of episodes in the bank before I even published like my first one of the season, because I learned the hard way, if you don't think about it long term and you get busy, it is so easy to just fall behind, fall off schedule, because it's not like it's time consuming to do it. And so you really need to have that forethought. and be honest with yourself about what you and your team can do, or else you're going to look like a fool like I did and just kind of like go out the gate hot and then just fall apart and disappear and then be like, sorry guys, oops. And for me, I'm just a person, so like I could get away with it. But if you're a corporation or a company, like it's not going to look professional. It's going to look messy, and it's something that you want to be aware of before you start and like announce what you're doing.
Oh, I thank you for sharing that story. So I'll share one of my own just like it. So same thing when I first launched, I had 8 lined up before I went live to give myself a buffer, and that went pretty well. But then I got into panic mode over summer because I was traveling and other people were traveling. And so then the following year I said, "Oh, that was so exhausting. Let's go to every other week." And
Mm-hmm.
watch the metrics, and while we still had growth, it had slowed way down the slope of that line. And so then I recommitted to weekly, but brought on help and had a more, I guess, a more proactive way of managing the editorial calendar and the guests. And now it's all coming together. But definitely had some panicky moments, just like you did. So I feel you. I feel you. Um,
It's
cool.
hard.
Well, okay. So now let's talk about all those tactical, logistical things because there are so many things that you have to learn and figure out. So, Jordan, where should we start?
Yes. So I literally wrote it down in a PDF the other day, guys. So I will try to clean this up to where if you want it, you can reach out to me or Wendy and we can give you a copy. But right now it's scatterbrain notes. So what I have for step 1 is name your podcast. You can't market something if it doesn't have a name. So I think when you are making a name, you want to make sure that you're in your niche, but you're not niching down too hard, because I noticed like when I wanted to start my podcast, which is called Failing for You, I wanted to bring people on in our industry and have it be related to our industry. But there was already a lot of like automation and manufacturing podcasts. And so I didn't want that in my name because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. But if you're a company with a very specific industry, you can niche down and it could help you with your SEO. So just be aware of like what audience you want, make your name, and then make sure that the name isn't taken by anybody else. So you don't want to have that conflict of people looking it up and it not being you. So name your podcast. Wendy, do you want to comment on each of these steps as I go? Because I don't want to seem like I'm just going on forever, and maybe you give your feedback
Hey,
per one so we could break
it's
it up.
so far so good. Give your podcast a name that's original. Check.
All right. Step 2, establish an RSS feed. So, this is basically where your podcast lives in the universe. And this is for your audio file. So, when you go and you listen to something on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, it's coming from an RSS feed. Now, I like to use a server called Buzzsprout, and there's multiple different ones like it, but I liked it because it was $12 a month and you upload it to Buzzsprout, your MP3 file. And we'll get into like the how to record, but this is the technical stuff you need set up. You download it there, and then through Buzzsprout, the website, you can connect to Spotify, you can connect to Apple Podcasts, and all of your show artwork will just show up there. And each week when you publish from your RSS feed, it will publish to all the other platforms. So
I
that's
know it's
very
kind of like
important.
a mini HubSpot for podcasting. We use Buzzsprout as well, and it's
Yeah.
so great, so easy. Yeah, big fan.
Me too. That, and then if you are going to be posting video, make sure you have like a YouTube channel set up. So it'd be sort of the same thing, which doing video on your podcast is a whole nother monster of, steps to take care of, but it's really important too. So make sure you have both of those set up. So that's step 2. Step 3 would be establishing an online recording software if you're going to be doing Zoom style videos. So, or audio recordings. Right now, Wendy and I are recording on Riverside, which is my go to because it looks like you are in Zoom, Microsoft Teams, one of those, and you can record with anybody, anywhere, and you set up. There's so much AI built in. When we're done recording, what Wendy is going to be able to do is go in, download the audio tracks. She can even have Riverside clean up all the dead space, normalize the audio levels, and make it sound good, cut out dead spaces, which are things you probably wouldn't have even thought about until you go to edit your audio for the first time. It also captures video. So maybe Wendy and I are in 2 completely different places and my internet is a little weird. She can't hear me sometimes, but like the video is good enough. Well, it's uploading directly from where I'm at to Riverside. It's not going to Wendy. So our audio and video quality are really savored as they're going to the cloud. Afterwards, you can do this thing where you literally click generate episode. It'll clean up all your dead spaces, put both your videos together, and you can add your logo, you can add captions. You can also do it where it writes your episode description for you. I'm sure Wendy and her team, since they're writers, they probably, write more of their own descriptions. But if you're like me and you love AI, you can let it write it for you. Just make sure people's names are spelled correctly. And then there's also something where you can generate AI magic clips where it'll go through and it'll take like 5 clips from your video and create short style reels that are vertical style. And you can use them for social posts like YouTube Shorts, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of that to then have social posts. Those are all the things that will come out of it. So you need to pick an online recording software. I like Riverside. I've seen a lot of people use Zoom. I personally wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's as good as Riverside. And Riverside is, I think, for the best version of it, you could pay $40 a month. There's enterprise versions, but you probably don't need that unless you are a full-on like podcast recording studio. So there's
Yeah.
that. Your software, use Riverside.
Check. Yeah. And Zencaster is a very similar platform to Riverside. And you have to go online to look at the compare and contrast, but that's another one to
Mm-hmm.
look at. And we just moved over from Zoom. And because of all the, you did a great job of, he should be a Riverside FM salesperson, Jordan, because
Right? I know.
you did a great job of talking about those benefits. So I was a little skeptical at the magic video short
Mm-hmm.
feature, but wow, I mean, it's been very impressive. Saved us so much time, and before we had an Adobe license to do all the video editing. That was quite expensive compared to these
Yeah.
subscriptions here. So big cost savings too, and not just time.
Yeah, to me, like saving time is saving money too. Like I just love anything that saves me time because I just do so much every single day, and it's an easy way to keep things organized, so I like it. And I notice that they're constantly adding new features to it. So I just realized in the last week, like the captions went from like one format to like you have way more options and you can customize it. So they're definitely on it with like keeping up with trying to keep it updated, because even the other day I was like, I like to use the captions app with it, and they're like, why do you like using it? What's it missing? And then the next week, like the system was updated, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna complain more often. This is great. They're
Nice.
listening.
Hey, thanks. I
So
like the captions. They're looking good.
yeah. So the next step would be you need an intro or an outro or a jingle. So that's basically like Wendy's intro to this podcast has like the, hey, we're true marketing, and there's a little bit of music with it. You need something like that. To me, when I did this was really hard because I had no idea where to start. I went to Epidemic Sound, which is like a royalty free sound cloud where you can like download a bunch of different music. What I didn't realize is you basically have to pay monthly in perpetuity for the rights to that song unless you want to outright buy the song, which is expensive. But since then, there was these things where you can use like AI jingles. They're not going to be as good. Or the third option that I've discovered is you can go on a website like Fiverr and you can pay somebody like $30 to make you a custom jingle. I have a couple of like links to people I like in Fiverr for stuff like that, because to me, like that stuff is so hard. I'm not musical. I don't know how to like make music. I don't know, like I tried to go in like the guitar, like garage band thing and make sounds. Horrible. So let somebody do it for like $30, unless you're talented, make your own music, and then have like a 15 to 30 second, like, welcome to this podcast. You're going to hear about XYZ, and be very thoughtful about this because it's an important way to hook somebody.
Yeah. And I think your intro is very professional. I like where you landed with it. It sounds great. We're about to reproduce ours because it's kind of dated, but I do want to say we found a music site where you pay once. It's not monthly. I don't remember
Nice.
the name, but I will put it in the show notes. And there were a lot of royalty things to choose from. So
Mm-hmm.
we found some great resource for that. And then, of course, we hired someone to do the voiceover. So that's another nice one, is it's not your own voice, but maybe somebody else introducing the show to just get people's attention.
Yeah. There's so many good voice actors that you can find, and they're actually kind of cheap. So it's like you
Yeah.
you can do one for like $30. Like I've had somebody on Fiverr make me a bunch of like podcast commercials because I like to do it in a professional voice and not my own to break it up. And so
Cool.
it's really cool what you can pay people $30 to $50 to do. And it's way cheaper than like somebody will come up to you and be like, yeah, for $5,000, I'll make that for you. If somebody is saying for thousands of dollars to make you something like this, question them, message us, and we'll point you in the cheaper direction. But if you want to go all out, go all out. I don't know what your budget is.
There you go.
All right, next is cover art. So you're going to realize you need this, and it's going to come up quick because as soon as you establish your RSS feed, it's going to be like, where's your cover art? Where's this? Where's that? There's multiple ways to go about it. For me, I like using the tool Canva, Canva. It is $13 a month for like the full subscription, whatever. It's great because you can type in podcast cover art and it will give you hundreds of templates to choose from. You could then go in, drop in your logos, drop in your picture, and then just change the name to being whatever your podcast name is, change the colors to your color scheme. But that's how I've always made mine. I just think that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, check. Also, Canva. And in Jordan, we had a big internal debate about, do you have the host picture on there or not? Are you pro or con photos
I don't know. I'm pretty cute, so I put my picture on.
There you go. There you
No,
go.
I think it depends on what your topic is about. For
Fair.
me, on mine is failing for you. It's Jordan is failing for you. It's like my face is on it because it's like, hey, here's the silly girl that's always messing up. But when I did it for my last company, I was not on the cover because it was for the company. And
Mhm.
so we would have like covers that we would use for promotional purposes, like the YouTube thumbnail would feature me and then whoever the guest was. So for promotional purposes, you should have the ability to have a format where you have your face on it because that's helpful. But I would say for the actual podcast, I'm 50-50. It really just depends what you're talking about. And if the picture can do more harm than good, then don't have it because you don't want someone to create a bias or get the wrong idea based off a picture. So it
Mhm.
really is personal preference. Do some testing, do a couple options and then show your team, see what they vote on.
I like that. And of course, look at your competition out there, get an idea of what their thumbnails look like so you can stand out for sure. And I assume, Jordan, that you have other creative assets, not just your cover art, but you mentioned ways to show the two of you in ads. And what about the frame? Do you have a frame?
So sometimes I'll do the frame where like I used to do it, but I've gotten a little bit lazy to where you can go into Canva as well and you can create like a frame that goes over your YouTube video. And it's also called like a overlay, I think. And you can like put in your name, their name, your show title. I used to do this for every episode, but I got tired of having the extra step of downloading it. It'll make it look a lot more professional. So I would say look into that. Typically, to find the best overlays, you type in Twitch overlays because there's more formats for that in Canva than there is for podcasting ones. But you could also make one from scratch and then like do that for each one. But like I said, I got to the point where I just downloaded my episode from Riverside because I could throw my logo on in there. And I've just given up on doing the overlay because I do everything myself and I'm out of time.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Hey, and that's fine. Riverside gets you so far ahead, and had to decide where to. It's kind of like I have a Jeep Wrangler, like a '93 Jeep Wrangler, and I could just put so much money and trick it out, and you
Yep.
have to decide when is good enough on the Jeep and the podcast. So I hear you.
And you can always add it later. Like, I'm a big fan of brand consistency. So I would say if you're going to do it, try to make it good the first time and leave it moving forward. This is one thing I've done a horrible job at with my podcast over the years. If you go watch different episodes, the first season, like the first 10 episodes, all have different layovers. Then I use the same one for like 10 episodes, and then I just stop using one. So for a professional brand, pick one and stick with it or don't do it at all because it's really chaotic when you change it a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe do an annual refresh if you feel
Yes.
so moved, something like that. Yeah. All right. What comes next?
Okay, equipment. Now, this is the last thing I have on my list, so we'll have to see if I forgot anything. But I would say equipment is what you need. Obviously, if you're going to be recording remotely, it's different equipment than if you're recording in person. A lot of people these days seem to record remotely, so I would say have a laptop with a decent camera on it. I just use the camera that's on my Mac. I don't have an external camera because sometimes they get really hot, they get worn down. You can get an external camera if you need. I know there's lots of good 4K ones, but if you're trying to spend as little as possible, just use your laptop camera. And then you need a microphone. And this is where it's really important because you need good audio quality. You need it to be clear. But don't be mistaken for that being expensive. The headset that I'm wearing right now, I like because it was less than $30. I got it on Amazon. It plugs into my computer and it is literally like the headphone and microphone all in one. The reason this is so important is because when I was the host of an oil and gas podcast, I would have guests on all the time that were remote and they would have like a microphone in front of them, but they would never speak like the right distance from it. So these fancy
Mm.
microphones, you need to be like 6 inches from it. You need to be facing it. You can't move your head when you talk. And if you look away, then you lose the quality. And so I realized for my co hosts that could not stay on the mic, got them headsets and it kept them on the mic. It kept the audio quality consistent and it'll just make it sound better. And I like it for myself because I move around when I talk. So it makes me stay on the mic too. I have some suggestions for like more high quality microphones, which if you do, I would suggest having a headset as well because you want the feedback loop from your audio that say Wendy's talking to me. If I don't have the headphones in, then my computer may pick it up and create like an echo because it's listening to her talk to me. So close the loop with a pair of headphones, unless you have a really high quality microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Good advice. Well, I did go the microphone route because I didn't want stuff on my head because I'll
I
fiddle with
hate it. It
it.
gives me a headache. Like I'll say it's the one drawback. Like this thing just like hurts the side of my head. So I like
Yeah,
to
yeah.
try to limit myself to one podcast a day or I just get a headache.
Yeah, but I plenty of people use that $30 headset. I know the Marketing Book podcast, that's a requirement to be a guest of the Marketing Book podcast. It's the exact one you're wearing, so it works. You don't have to spend the money. I'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
my microphone story because I love it. I at
Yeah.
first threw down on this really expensive Yeti microphone, not to be confused with the cooler people.
Mm-hmm.
And it is I think it's called an omnidirectional microphone, meaning
Yeah.
it's really sensitive. It'll pick up like everything around you. And by that, I mean, my husband, who also home offices across the house, his conversation, the dog running through the living room, like it would pick up everything. And I couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
it. And so I moved to a directional microphone, and this is a USB podcaster by Rode,
Mm.
Rode. And
I love
I've
road.
been really, really happy with it. Super easy, literally USB, it plugs in. I don't even think I had to download any drivers. Like it was just done. So good.
There are some really complicated mixing board options. Like I remember when I first started because I worked for like a podcast network on the side. And if you go in person, like they'll have like the mixing board. And when you go like watch videos on how to start a podcast and like what equipment do you need, there'll be literal like boards with all these controls on it that you plug into that then plugs into your computer. Guys, like don't do all that unless you have a sound engineer and you just like want it to be absolutely perfect. If you're doing it yourself, get something that plugs into your computer or else you're just going to be very overwhelmed and then you're just never going to get it done. Unless you're way smarter than me, then do what you want, you know?
Yeah, I guess what we're giving we're talking about is you have good, better, best options, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we're not focused on best today. We're focused on practical, it's professional, you can get something off the ground and then like you said, hire the pros if you want this to be radio perfect.
Exactly. That's my personal brand is good enough and functional. It's
Yeah.
what I aim for.
Well, I think that's a great talk on just all the gear that you need. The last one I'll mention is the trusty ring light, or otherwise
Yes.
think through your lighting. Like right now I have two windows off to my left, and if those windows are open, I would look completely washed out. And if my ring light's on too bright, I look shiny. So I'm always trying to fuddle with, all the lighting stuff. How do you handle it, Jordan?
I have two mobile lights that I like to use because I can dim them. I can change sort of the coloring on them because throughout the year, like I go outside a lot. So sometimes I'm really tan, sometimes I'm really white. So like a one size fits all light doesn't work for me if I want to look flattering. And so I have like these two mobile lights, which I don't know if I put them in here, but I have a link to them somewhere, where I just set up on the other side of my office, enough distance to where it's not washing me out because it's too bright. But I like having lights on like from both directions. That way it like comes in a flattering way and you can see
Yeah.
me. But if you're not doing video, I guess it doesn't matter. But something I realize I have to do is I have to dim them to like 50%, or else I will be blinding myself the whole time. And if I have to ask
Exactly.
questions, I'm like, oh gosh, like what does that say? And so you don't want to get up in the middle and turn it down. So just sit with them on for a few minutes first to make sure it's comfortable so you don't look crazy when you record.
Yeah. Good suggestions. Okay, so pulling away from that topic, I would love to hear how you measure podcast success.
Um, that is a good question. So there's like the legitimate metrics of listens, like people that will message you say, "Hey, I listened here. I want to, you know, be on," or sponsorships I've gotten, things like that. But for me, the when I first started, I wasn't worried about how many people are listening, because first off, if you're not putting money into ads and you don't have like a million followers, it's going to be embarrassing how many people are watching. So don't judge yourself too hard when you get 10 listens on your first episode. For me, it was about, I wanted good quality and I wanted to tell my story and build my human side of my personal brand, because I was posting a lot of things about like soldering and like how-to videos and technical videos, and I wanted people to get to know me. And so I felt like my success came from, hey, like people reaching out being like, "Oh my gosh, like I didn't know this about you, but I listened to your podcast and like I so relate to this." And I get so many messages all the time now of people telling me like, "I can't believe you actually talked about that on your podcast. Like that was such a crazy failure. Thank you for normalizing that. Thank you for sharing it with me." Like, to me, I measure it based off like the impact it has, and it's a bit of a slow burn.
Mhm.
Especially if you're not doing like super clickbaity stuff, then it's not going to come immediately. But I think there's very different measurables for somebody who's doing it for a business purpose. So you probably have better insight on that. Mine was more of just like the humanization part of my brand.
Yeah. Well, I have insight, but also frustration with the measurement side of things. So we mentioned Buzzsprout earlier, and as the
Mhm.
central place where you're uploading your episodes and casting them out, you also get to see quite a few metrics of just how many people are downloading your episodes. So you can
Mhm.
look at growth as a show itself, as well as how each individual episode is doing, how popular they are. You can look at that from a time horizon, like first 7 days or first 30 days or just all time. And
Mhm.
so that's been helpful to build my editorial calendar to see which material is resonating, which guests should I bring back, things like that. You're not doing, you don't know the demographics of the people listening. So
Yeah.
that's a little, frustrating. You don't have much information about them. So then a good strategy is to have a companion blog post, have a subscription mechanism from your website, just some ways to do light lead capture. It won't
Mhm.
be as successful as just people listening off of Spotify, off of Apple, because that's just what people like to do. But at least it's supplemental, and you can get an idea of your subscriber base, and maybe interact with them in a focus group type manner to if you want to dig into what's working and what's not. So, you know,
Yeah. I
yeah.
think that's a good point, is like have a way to have a little bit of lead capture in there. For me, something I like to do, if you go on like my YouTube channel and see my podcast, you'll see they all have like thousands of views. What I do is I take every dollar that my what are they called? Sponsors pay for my episode. So maybe it's like $300 I made that episode. I then turn around and I put it all into YouTube ads. So I've never done
Mm,
ads before because I'm like, I'm so organic. People just like me for me. I'll grow slowly. But I think if you want to jumpstart it a little bit for the brand awareness piece, do some ad spending. And so I've realized with YouTube, it's great because you have two options. You can get more views of your video. Say you spend $100, you can get like 5,000 views, or you get more engagement with your channel. So maybe you'll get like 500 views, but you get like 30 new subscribers. So it really takes the algorithm and puts it in front of who you think should be seeing it. So if you want to, save budget by doing all the things we told you of how to do it cheaply, and then spend your budget on ad spend, that's a good way to get more brand awareness, more subscribers. Now, it's not going to convert exactly into leads, but it may make your shows seem a little bit more engaging or, get in front of new possible people. But ad spend is so like 50-50 of like, is it going to bring me a lead or is it just going to give me more brand awareness? So define your goal and then spend accordingly.
There you go. And experiment and measure just like we do with everything else, right?
Yep.
Good advice. Well, let's talk a little bit about your show, Failing for You. What is it about and why did you choose this subject?
So, Feeling for You is about as straightforward as it sounds. I'm your host, Jordan Yates, and I am out here, just learning as I go, figuring things out. And I fail constantly because I'm not really naturally good at much, but I love to learn. I love to problem solve. And so, I've had a very unique career. Like, I'm only 25, but I've had some pretty cool jobs. Own my own business. Like, I have a lot going on. And from the outside, it used to seem like, wow, like she's just really got it all together and it wasn't as relatable. But I was like, guys, like I only got here because I put myself out here so many times, got rejected, embarrassed myself, like did so many dumb things that didn't work. And so at first I just wanted to come on and like humanize myself and be like, listen, like here's the behind the scenes. If you want to start a podcast, here's how I started it. And it was kind of hard, but I'll tell you my experience. And then I was like, you know what? Like, sure, my experience is cool, but I'm not like eternally interesting to where I can make an episode every week and it's just perpetual. Like I have so many stories. Like, yes, I failed a lot, but I don't have forever amount of stories of like success at the end of it. Like I'm still failing. So I was like, what's a good way to make it feel like it's more a part of the community? So I opened it up to guests. And then my guests will come on, they will tell us about things like maybe they're a small business owner, they are an automation engineer or something that's usually related to the industrial industry. Come on, tell us about their career, tell us about their backstory, how they failed, how they learned. And ideally, me and my guests were failing for you so you can learn from us because we learned the hard way. And then maybe just inspire you to go fail yourself a little bit.
There you go. So perfect people are not allowed to listen. It's only those of us who have failed. Yeah, right. So we can all relate to that. I think it's a wonderful take on this subject, very fresh. And I love what I'm hearing so far. So you're doing great. And if people would like to listen, I assume they can go to their favorite podcast platform and listen. Is that correct? Or where would you
Yes.
tell people to go? Okay.
Yeah, we're all over. I and my guests are on any podcast platform and then YouTube. So just type in "Failing for You" and you'll see my face pop up, and it's a bluish green background. So click on that and have a listen.
Awesome. And if people want to connect with you directly, what's the best way to do that?
I would say LinkedIn is where I'm most active. So you could just look up Jordan Yates on LinkedIn and I'll be there. I like to interact with people a lot there. Sometimes I'm a little slow with messaging, but yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your podcast wisdom and really appreciate it. And great to see you again.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.